There are now 110 days until the midterms, and tonight Donald Trump showed his hand. In a speech lasting nearly half an hour, he revived many of his old, debunked claims about an old election while largely ignoring the key issues that have been at the top of many American voters' minds. Trump ordered the immediate declassification of documents that he claims contain evidence of foreign interference in the 2020 election. He specifically accused China of acquiring hundreds of millions of voter files and alleged that members of the so-called deep state suppressed evidence of it.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. Members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency worked to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling.
Trump and others in his orbit have actually been making some version of these same claims for years. Most of what we got tonight was a big nothing burger, more of the same. The voter data that Trump claims China acquired, names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preference, most of that can be easily retrieved online by most people. In some states, it is part of the public record. In others, it's commercially available for purchase, and there's no evidence to date that anything was hacked. The claim that this information was suppressed also doesn't hold up. All the way back in January of 2021, while Trump was still president, the intelligence community presented him with a report about its assessment of foreign threats to the 2020 election, and it concluded, quote, "We have no indications that any foreign actor attempted to alter any technical aspect of the voting process in the 2020 U.S. elections." Elsewhere, the documents actually undercut Trump's own narrative by noting ways that Russia tried to hurt Joe Biden in order to help Donald Trump. And none of Trump's other claims tonight are new. He just never found anything to support the outcome that he himself wants. In the weeks after the 2020 election, you may recall, Trump filed dozens of lawsuits across the country challenging the results of the presidential race that he unquestionably lost. He and his team of lawyers made every allegation possible. Fraudulent votes, rigged voting machines, irregularities with mail-in ballots. But they weren't able to prove any of it because there was no evidence to back up their claims. They lost in court more than 60 times, and now he is losing in the court of public opinion. In a new poll released today by the Washington Post and Ipsos, only 37% of Americans say that they approve of the job Trump is doing as president. 61% say that they disapprove. His poor marks are driven by deep dissatisfaction over his war of choice with Iran. Just 29% of Americans say that they approve of his handling of that war, while 69% disapprove. Meanwhile, his handling of the economy received 33% approval, and immigration, which, of course, was one of his top issues on the campaign trail, topped out at just 40%. There is a reason Trump is relaunching the big lie tonight as we close in on 100 days to the midterms. Trump sees the writing on the wall. The possibility that his party could lose control of not one, but maybe two chambers of Congress, it doesn't look like he can win on policy or even on good old-fashioned campaign messaging, so he's turning to voter suppression and lies to try to rig the game. And he's not even really hiding it at this point. When asked by a reporter today if Trump will accept the results of the midterms, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt dodged the question. Instead, she just said, people should tune into Trump's speech tonight, which was essentially just another shameless pitch for Congress to pass his voter suppression bill, the Save America Act.
Addressing this crisis of election security demands that Congress must pass the Save America Act. How easy is that to do unless you want to cheat? The only reason you wouldn't do it is you want to cheat because your policies are so bad and your candidates are so pathetic that you can't get away or can't get elected any other way.
Every accusation is a confession. Joining me now is Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, the president has been hyping up this speech for days, but it played a lot like a rehash of the same debunked lies he has been presenting for the past 6 years, and seemed to be in service of pushing a voter suppression bill that his own party has told him repeatedly doesn't have the votes to pass in the Senate. What were your top line takeaways from this speech tonight?
The first one is that this is a man desperate to hold on to his power, and he will do anything to keep that power. And that's why, to me, when I watch that thing, I think he is at it again. He is relitigating that last election that he lost, and instead of changing his policies, giving a speech about why health care premiums are skyrocketing because of his decision to not extend the tax credits on the Affordable Care Act plans, or why his tariffs have been such a disaster for farmers in Minnesota, for small businesses across the country. He chose, instead of chasing his policies, he chose to try to undermine the election because he wants to make people scared to vote, and he wants to, it almost to me as if he was inviting attacks on our election structure. Because a lot of these things we've known about before. We know foreign powers do try to attack our systems. But as we know from 2020, if you have some people in place and you've got some strong secretaries in place, Secretary of State's in place, you can protect it. And his own attorney general at the time, as well as the man in charge of his election security, Chris Krebs, all had said that that election was secure. And in fact, judge after judge after judge, including Republican-appointed judges, Trump-appointed judges, verified that that election was secure.
We've also been reading the documents tonight. I've been spending the last couple of hours going through them. And so far,
you're impressive.
I'm doing my best. I haven't gone through everything. But so far, they're pretty underwhelming, I would say. One of the documents released tonight says that China prefers that President Trump be defeated and had stepped up public rhetoric criticizing his administration, but also says Beijing did not intend to try to affect the election. And that same document brings up Russian involvement to help Trump. I'll quote you from some of it. We assess that Russia is using a range of measures primarily to denigrate former Vice President Biden and what it sees as an anti-Russia establishment. For example, it is directing or encouraging proxies to spread claims about Vice President Biden. Some Kremlin-linked actors are also seeking to boost President Trump's candidacy on social media. There are even references to Burisma, if we really want to make these deep cuts, and you know, there's references to you know, planning to drop a big scandal about Joe Biden. Doesn't all of this cut against Trump's claims that foreign interference is the reason why he was not in the White House come 2021 to 2024?
Of course it does. And my guess is he didn't really look at all those documents. But to me, what is he doing now? So let's look at it, since we know these threats can be out there. He's giving this speech attacking mail-in ballots, the way 1 in 3 Americans vote, to basically stir distrust of our election. And if he really is worried about security, why did he get rid of the Election Assistance Commission commissioners, who I know, and I worked on this with former Republican Senator Roy Blunt. We both chaired the Senate Rules Committee, and we made sure they had ample funds to be able to work with the states on security. Why did he fire those people that could have helped with security? Why did he stop, as my Secretary of State, Steve Simon in Minnesota, has pointed out, why did he stop the briefings and the work that was done to work with the states on this? And I'm glad that we have, including Republican Secretary of State, Secretary of States that have stood up for their own integrity of their own elections. And that's what gives me faith that we're going to have a safe election this fall. But what this guy is doing is holding on to his power. And all you have to hear is those attacks on mail-in ballots, which, you know, including in some deep red states like Utah, except we're going to win a congressional district there. That is the way people vote. It's not just blue states. It is all over the country where a lot of people, including Donald Trump himself in the past, have used mail-in ballots. So to me, when you just hear that attack on mail-in ballots, you know, again, what he is up to.
I will point out that there are some other Republicans who are sort of aiding and abetting the president's delusions here and denigrating some of your Senate colleagues.
Really?
Well, just as an example, your Republican colleague, Senator Tommy Tuberville, suggested this evening that some of your Democratic colleagues in the Senate are basically serving illegally. Let's play that.
We probably have 4 or 5 senators that didn't legally win. They shouldn't be up here. And it's just unfortunate that that's happened.
He's not alone. Senator Cynthia Lummis has suggested basically the same thing. I mean, isn't there some sort of like decorum rule in the Senate where you're not supposed to denigrate your colleagues, much less suggest that they are serving illegally?
Well, this is completely outrageous, and we know that based on some of Trump's remarks in the past that he is focused on Georgia and our 2 incredible senators, Senator Warnock, Senator Ossoff, who have minced no words in talking about what Donald Trump is up to here. In fact, I remember Senator Warnock at a field hearing that I held down in Georgia on voting rights saying, it's simple what people are doing here. Some people don't want some people to vote. And I think that in just a few words encapsulates exactly what Donald Trump is up to. He is trying to make it harder for people to vote. And to me, the answer is vote. Vote and vote early. Right now, there's some primaries going on, but very soon the general election, as you point out, just over 100 days away, is upon us. And people need to vote. There needs to be a check on this guy. And the way you do it is in the House, in the Senate, and in governors' offices and state legislatures across the country.
But just to clarify, do you think it is appropriate for your Republican Senate colleagues to suggest that?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Fair enough.
They're literally being rubber stamps of Donald Trump. And that's the scariest thing of a bunch of these Republican candidates right now. It is very rare that someone stands up, and it usually happens when they've lost their election or decided not to run. And then they're willing to kind of take the risk and tell the truth or take on an issue, whether it be tariffs, whether it be the need for the War Powers Act, whether it be taking on Todd Blanche at the hearing. They tend to be the people who are either not running again or lost their primary. And I'm glad they're doing it. Do not get me wrong. But this is why this election is so important, and it's important for people to get out there and vote, because this is not just a normal Donald Trump rant that you heard tonight. This is someone that will do anything to hold on to his power.